The eviction notice trembled in Zara's hands as she stood outside her family's small apartment, watching her mother cry into her hands while her little brother Tommy asked why all their things were in boxes on the sidewalk. The paper felt like it weighed 1,000 pounds, but it was nothing compared to the crushing weight in her chest as she realized this was really happening. They had nowhere to go, no money left, and winter was coming fast. Zara Johnson had always known her family was poor, but she never imagined they would end up homeless. Her mother worked 2 jobs just to keep food on the table after her father died in a car accident 3 years ago. The medical bills from his time in the hospital had eaten up their savings, and now even the small apartment they called home was being taken away. "Mama, what are we going to do?" Zara whispered, wrapping her arms around her mother's shaking shoulders. At 22, she felt like she should have answers, should be able to fix this somehow. But her job at the local diner barely paid enough to help with groceries, let alone rent. Her mother looked up with red, swollen eyes. "There might be a way," she said quietly, so quiet that Tommy couldn't hear from where he sat on their old couch that now sat on the curb. "Mrs. Chun from down the hall, she told me about something. A family that helps people like us, but what, Mama? They want something in return. They want you to marry their son." The words hit Zara like a slap. She stepped back, shaking her head. "What? That's crazy. People don't do that anymore. This isn't some old movie." But her mother's face told her it was real. Dead serious. The Chin family owes them money too. Their daughter did it last year. They paid off all her family's debts, gave them a house, made sure her little siblings could go to college. But she had to marry this man she'd never met. Zara felt sick. And what happened to her? She moved away. Mrs. Chin hasn't heard from her since the wedding. The silence that followed was broken only by Tommy asking when they could go back inside. Zara looked at her 8-year-old brother, so innocent and trusting that the adults in his life would take care of him. He didn't understand that they were about to be sleeping in their car, if they were lucky enough to keep it. "Who are these people?" Zara asked, her voice barely working. "The Blackwood family. They own half the businesses in the city. Adrian Blackwood is the son. He's 28 and needs a wife for some business reasons. His father said he doesn't care who as long as she's young and can play the part." Zara had heard of the Blackwoods. Everyone in their neighborhood had. They owned the shopping centers, the apartment buildings, even the bank that had foreclosed on their home. They were the kind of rich that regular people only saw in magazines or on TV. "I can't do this, Mama. I can't marry a stranger." Her mother took her hands. "I know, baby. I know it's not fair. But look around us. Look at Tommy. If we don't do something, he'll be sleeping on the street tonight. Social services will take him away from us. At least this way you'll be safe and we'll have a home." Zara turned away, unable to look at the desperation in her mother's eyes. She walked to the end of the block and back, trying to think of any other option. She could ask her friends for help, but they were all struggling too. She could try to get a loan, but who would lend money to someone with no credit and no collateral? She could look for a better job, but that would take time they didn't have. When she came back, her mother was holding a business card. "Mrs. Chin gave me this. If you want to meet with them, they're expecting your call today." Zara took the card with shaking fingers. It was thick, expensive paper with gold lettering that read Blackwood Enterprises, and had a phone number at the bottom. Just holding it made her feel small and powerless. What if he's terrible to me? What if he hurts me? Mrs. Chin said her daughter never complained about being hurt. Just that she was lonely. The Blackwoods have a reputation to protect. They wouldn't let anything bad happen to you where people could see. That wasn't exactly comforting, but it was something. Zara looked at Tommy, who was now playing with his toy cars on the sidewalk like this was all just a big adventure. He trusted her to make the right choice. He trusted the adults to keep him safe. "If I do this," Zara said slowly, "you have to promise me you'll take care of yourself. Get your health checked, stop working so many hours, make sure Tommy stays in school." "Does that mean?" "It means I need to make a phone call." The number rang 3 times before a crisp, professional voice answered. "Blackwood Enterprises, how may I help you?" "This is Zara Johnson. I'm calling about the arrangement." "One moment please." The hold music was classical and expensive sounding, nothing like the tinny radio in their apartment. After what felt like forever, a man's voice came on the line. "Miss Johnson, this is Richard Blackwood. I understand you're interested in discussing a business proposal with my family." Business proposal. Like she was applying for a job instead of selling herself into marriage. "Yes, sir. My family needs help and I was told you might be able to provide it in exchange for services." "Indeed. Are you available to meet this afternoon?" We prefer to handle these matters quickly and discreetly. Zara looked at her mother, who nodded encouragingly. Yes, I can be there. Excellent. My driver will pick you up at 3 p.m. Please dress appropriately. We'll be discussing terms that will affect the rest of your life. The line went dead before Zara could ask what appropriately meant or where they were going. She looked down at her worn jeans and faded t-shirt, then at her mother's worried face. What did I just do, Mama? You did what you had to do to save this family. Your father would be proud of you. But as Zara watched a black sedan pull up exactly at 3 p.m., she wondered if her father would really be proud, or if he would be heartbroken that his daughter had to sacrifice herself to fix the problems he'd left behind. The driver didn't speak to her during the 20-minute ride to a part of the city she'd never been to, where the houses were so big they looked like hotels and the lawns were bigger than the parks in her neighborhood. The Blackwood mansion sat behind iron gates that opened automatically as they approached. Zara had never seen anything like it except in movies. It was white stone with tall columns and windows that sparkled in the afternoon sun. Gardens stretched out on both sides, perfectly maintained and beautiful in a way that seemed almost fake. As she walked up the marble steps to the front door, Zara realized there was no going back now. Whatever happened in the next hour would change everything. She thought about Tommy playing with his cars on the sidewalk and took a deep breath. She could do this. She had to do this. The door opened before she could knock, revealing a woman in a black dress who looked like she worked there. Miss Johnson? Please follow me. Mr. Blackwood is waiting in the study. The inside of the house was even more impressive than the outside. The ceiling was so high Zara had to crane her neck to see it, and everything was decorated in gold and deep red colors that screamed money. Her worn sneakers made no sound on the thick carpet as she followed the woman down a hallway lined with paintings that probably cost more than her family's yearly income. The study was a room full of dark wood and leather chairs, with books covering every wall from floor to ceiling. A man in his 50s sat behind a desk that looked like it could seat 12 people for dinner. He was wearing a suit that probably cost more than Zara's family made in 6 months. Miss Johnson, please sit. I'm Richard Blackwood, and I believe we have some business to discuss. As Zara settled into the leather chair across from him, she realized she was about to negotiate the sale of her own life. The thought made her stomach turn, but she kept her face calm. Tommy was counting on her. Her mother was counting on her. She couldn't let them down now. Richard Blackwood studied Zara with cold gray eyes that seemed to see right through her. She tried not to fidget in the massive leather chair, but everything about this room made her feel small and out of place. The silence stretched on until she wondered if she was supposed to speak first. You're younger than I expected, he finally said, making notes on a paper in front of him. How old are you exactly? 22, sir. Education. I graduated high school. I was going to go to college, but... She trailed off, not wanting to explain how her father's death had ended those dreams. But financial circumstances prevented it. Yes, I'm aware of your family's situation. Quite dire, from what I understand. Heat rushed to Zara's cheeks. It was humiliating to have this rich man discussing her poverty like she wasn't even there. We've had some bad luck, but we're good people. Hard-working people. I'm sure you are. Hard work alone doesn't pay the bills, unfortunately. That's why you're here. He opened a folder and spread several papers across the desk. These are the terms of the arrangement. Your family's debts will be paid in full. Your mother and brother will be moved to a suitable home in a good neighborhood. Your brother's education will be funded through college, including any graduate school he may wish to pursue. Zara's eyes widened. All of that. In exchange for a marriage contract with my son Adrian. The marriage will last a minimum of 2 years. During that time you'll live in his home, attend social functions as his wife, and present a convincing image of a happy couple to the public. What about after 2 years? You'll be free to divorce with a substantial settlement. Enough to ensure you never have to worry about money again. Or you may choose to remain married, if the arrangement proves satisfactory to both parties. Sounded too good to be true. There had to be a catch. What's he like? Your son. Richard's expression grew cooler. Adrian is a successful businessman who prefers to keep his personal life private. He's not interested in a traditional marriage based on romance and sentiment. He needs a wife for business purposes, and you need financial security. It's a practical arrangement that benefits everyone involved. But what if we don't get along? What if he doesn't like me? Adrian's personal preferences are irrelevant. He understands his obligations and you'll understand yours. As long as you fulfill your part of the contract, there won't be any problems. The way he said it made Zara nervous. What exactly are my obligations? Richard slid a thick document across the desk. It's all detailed here. You'll live in Adrian's home, attend public events as his wife, and maintain the appearance of a stable marriage. You'll dress appropriately for your position, learn proper etiquette, and never discuss the true nature of your arrangement with anyone outside this family. Zara picked up the contract and tried to read it, but the legal language was confusing and intimidating. Can I take this home to look at it? I'm afraid not. These documents are confidential. You'll need to make your decision today. Today? But this is my whole life we're talking about. Miss Johnson, let me be clear about your situation. Your family will be homeless tonight. Your mother owes money to people who aren't as patient as I am. Your brother's future depends on the decision you make in the next hour. I'm offering you a solution that will solve all of these problems permanently. The weight of it all crashed down on Zara again. She thought about Tommy's trusting face, about her mother crying in the hallway. Can I meet him first? Your son. Richard checked his watch. Adrian will join us shortly. He's just finishing a business call. As if summoned by his words, the study door opened and a man walked in. Zara's breath caught in her throat. Adrian Blackwood was nothing like what she'd expected. He was tall and lean, with dark hair and green eyes that seemed to burn right through her. He was handsome in the way that made her feel awkward and tongue-tied, but there was something cold about him that made her want to shrink back into her chair. "Father," he said, nodding to the older man before turning those intense eyes on Zara. "This is her." The way he said it, like she was a piece of furniture being delivered, made Zara's temper flare. "I'm sitting right here. You can talk to me directly." Adrian's eyebrow rose slightly, like he was surprised she'd spoken. "Can you handle the social requirements? Public speaking, formal dinners, charity events." "I can learn." "Can you follow instructions without arguing?" "Depends on the instructions." The temperature in the room seemed to drop 10 degrees. Richard cleared his throat. "What my son means is that the role of Mrs. Blackwood comes with certain expectations. You'll need to be adaptable." Adrian moved to the window, looking out at the perfectly manicured gardens. "How do I know she won't become a problem? Try to turn this into something it's not." Now Zara was getting angry. "Look, I don't want to marry a stranger any more than you do. But I need to take care of my family, and apparently you need a wife for some reason. Can we at least try to be civil about it?" Adrian turned back to her, and for just a moment she thought she saw something almost like approval in his eyes. "Civil? Yes, I think we can manage civil." "Adrian, show Miss Johnson to the garden while I prepare the final paperwork," Richard said. "Give her a chance to see what she'd be gaining." Adrian held the door open for her, and Zara followed him through the house and out onto a stone terrace that overlooked the most beautiful garden she'd ever seen. There were roses and fountains and pathways that curved around perfectly trimmed hedges. It was like something from a fairy tale. "It's beautiful," she said without thinking. "My mother designed it before she died. She said everyone should have a place where they could find peace." There was something in his voice that made Zara look at him more carefully. For just a moment, the cold mask slipped and she saw something raw and sad underneath. "How old were you when she died?" 15. "I'm sorry. I lost my father 3 years ago. It's hard." Adrian's face closed off again. "We should go back inside. The paperwork will be ready." As they walked back through the house, Zara tried to imagine living here, waking up in one of those grand bedrooms, eating meals in the formal dining room she'd glimpsed. It was more luxury than she'd ever dreamed of, but it felt cold and empty, like a museum instead of a home. Back in the study, Richard had several documents laid out. "The financial arrangements for your family have been completed. Your mother and brother will be moved to their new home tomorrow. Your brother will start at St. Andrew's Preparatory School on Monday." Zara's head spun. "Tomorrow? But what about saying goodbye? What about my job?" "Your employment has been terminated with appropriate compensation. As for goodbyes, you'll see your family at the wedding next week." "Next week?" Zara's voice came out as a squeak. "We prefer not to delay these arrangements. Adrian has business commitments that require a stable personal situation." Zara looked at Adrian, who was staring out the window again like none of this concerned him. "Don't I get any say in this?" "You can say no," Richard replied calmly. "But your family situation won't change. The eviction notice stands, the debts remain due, and your brother will be enrolled in public school in whatever neighborhood you can afford." Which was no neighborhood at all. Zara closed her eyes and tried to think. A week wasn't enough time to adjust to any of this, but maybe no amount of time would be enough. She was either going to do this or she wasn't. "If I sign this, what happens tonight? Where do I go?" "You'll stay here, of course." We'll need to prepare you for your new role. There's much to learn about being a Blackwood. The idea of staying in this cold, perfect house with these cold, perfect people made her stomach turn. But the alternative was watching her family fall apart. I need to call my mother. I need to explain. Of course. But remember, the details of this arrangement are confidential. Your family will know you married for love and security. Nothing more. Zara picked up the pen with shaking fingers. As she signed her name on line after line, she felt like she was signing away everything that made her who she was. When it was done, Richard collected the papers with satisfaction. Welcome to the family, my dear. Mrs. Chen will show you to your room. Dinner is served at 7 sharp. As Zara followed yet another uniformed woman up a grand staircase, she realized she hadn't just agreed to marry Adrian Blackwood. She'd agreed to become someone else entirely. The girl who worked at the diner and worried about rent was gone. In her place was Mrs. Adrian Blackwood, whoever that was supposed to be. The bedroom they gave her was bigger than her family's entire apartment, with its own bathroom and a closet that was already filled with clothes in her size. Everything was beautiful and expensive and cold, just like the rest of the house. Zara sat on the edge of the massive bed and called her mother. Mama? It's done. I signed the papers. Her mother's sob of relief came through the phone clearly. Thank you, baby. Thank you for saving us. But as Zara hung up and looked around her new prison, she wasn't sure she'd saved anyone. She just traded one kind of suffering for another. Zara woke up in silk sheets that probably cost more than her old monthly rent, but she'd never felt more out of place in her life. The morning light filtered through curtains that reached from floor to ceiling, casting everything in a golden glow that should have been beautiful but felt more like being trapped in a jewelry box. A soft knock on the door interrupted her thoughts. Come in, she called, pulling the covers up to her chin. An older woman in a crisp uniform entered carrying a silver tray. Good morning, Mrs. Blackwood. I'm Mrs. Patterson, the head housekeeper. I've brought your breakfast and your schedule for the day. Mrs. Blackwood. The name still felt foreign and wrong. Thank you, but I usually just have coffee and toast. Mrs. Patterson set the tray on a small table by the window, revealing eggs Benedict, fresh fruit, and pastries that looked like they came from a fancy bakery. Mr. Richard has arranged for you to meet with several instructors today. Etiquette, proper speech, social protocols. You'll need to be ready for public appearances as soon as possible. Zara's stomach sank. What kind of public appearances? There's a charity gala this Saturday. Your first official event as Mrs. Adrian Blackwood. The press will be there, so everything must be perfect. The thought of facing reporters and cameras made Zara feel sick. What if I mess up? What if I say the wrong thing? That's why we're starting your training immediately. Mrs. Vanderbilt will be here at 9 for deportment, followed by Mr. Chen for speech coaching, and then Mrs. Romano for wardrobe consultation. After Mrs. Patterson left, Zara picked at her breakfast and stared out the window at the gardens. They were beautiful, but she noticed there were high walls around the entire property. Was that to keep people out or to keep her in? Her phone buzzed with a text from her mother. Tommy loves his new room. Thank you so much, sweetheart. We love you. The message was followed by a photo of Tommy grinning as he sat at a real desk in what looked like a bright, cheerful bedroom. Her mother had sent another photo of their new kitchen, which was bigger and nicer than anywhere they'd ever lived. At least some good was coming from this nightmare. The deportment instructor turned out to be a stern woman in her 60s who made Zara walk with books on her head and practice sitting with perfect posture. A Blackwood woman never slouches, she said for the 100th time. Your posture reflects on the entire family. The speech coach was even worse. He made her repeat tongue twisters and recorded her voice, playing it back and pointing out every flaw. Your accent is too common. You sound like you're from the streets instead of society. We need to refine your speech patterns immediately. By the time the wardrobe consultant arrived, Zara felt like her head was spinning. Mrs. Romano was a tiny Italian woman who looked at Zara like she was a mannequin instead of a person. Strip, she commanded, pulling out a measuring tape. We need to see what we're working with. Excuse me? Your clothes. How can I properly fit you if I can't see your body? Zara had never felt more uncomfortable as the woman measured every inch of her, making notes and muttering in Italian. You're too thin. We need to add curves in the right places. Your skin is good, but you need professional treatments. Your hair. She shook her head sadly. We'll need to completely restructure it. There's nothing wrong with my hair. There's nothing right with it either. You're going to be photographed with some of the most beautiful women in the city. You need to look like you belong with them. By lunchtime, Zara felt like she'd been torn apart and rebuilt. Every part of her was apparently wrong and needed to be fixed. She ate alone in the formal dining room, at a table that could seat 20 people. The silence was broken only by the sound of her fork against the china. "How are the lessons going?" Zara jumped, not having heard Adrian enter the room. He looked impossibly perfect in a dark business suit, his hair perfectly styled and his expression perfectly unreadable. "Humiliating," she answered honestly. "Apparently everything about me is wrong and needs to be changed." "Not everything." He sat across from her, which somehow made the enormous table feel even bigger. "You stood up for yourself yesterday. Most people are too intimidated to do that. I was terrified. But you did it anyway. That's something." It was the first almost nice thing he'd said to her. "Why do you need a wife anyway? You're rich, good-looking, successful. Couldn't you find someone who actually wanted to marry you?" Adrian's face went cold again. "My personal life is not your concern. Your job is to play the part convincingly. Nothing more." "Right. Sorry I asked." They finished lunch in silence. Afterward, Adrian disappeared back to whatever important business he had, and Zara was left to more lessons. Dancing, table manners, small talk with society ladies. By the time dinner came around, she was exhausted and overwhelmed. Dinner was served in the same silent dining room, with Adrian at one end of the table and Zara at the other. They might as well have been eating in different rooms. Every time she tried to start a conversation, he answered with one word or just a nod. "This is ridiculous," she finally said. "If we're supposed to convince people we're happily married, shouldn't we at least be able to have a conversation? We're not in public right now. So you're just going to ignore me whenever we're alone?" "I'm not ignoring you. I'm giving you space to adjust." "I don't need space. I need to understand what I've gotten myself into. I need to know what you expect from me." Adrian set down his fork and looked at her directly for the first time since they'd sat down. "I expect you to learn what you're being taught. I expect you to look and act like someone who belongs in my world. I expect you to never embarrass me or my family in public. And I expect you to remember that this is a business arrangement, nothing more. What if I can't do it? What if I'm not good enough for your world? You'll have to be. Too much depends on it." "Like what? What's so important about this marriage?" But Adrian was already standing, his dinner barely touched. "I have work to do. Mrs. Patterson will show you to the library if you'd like something to read before bed." And just like that he was gone, leaving Zara alone again in the echoing silence of the huge house. She did go to the library mostly because she couldn't bear to sit in her room staring at the walls. It was a beautiful room, floor-to-ceiling books and comfortable chairs, but it felt as cold and untouchable as everything else in the house. She pulled a book from the shelf and curled up in one of the leather chairs, but she couldn't concentrate on the words. Her mind kept wandering to her old life. Right now, she would have been getting ready for her evening shift at the diner. She would have been joking with the other waitresses, complaining about difficult customers, counting her tips and hoping she'd made enough to help with groceries. It hadn't been much of a life, but it had been hers. She'd known who she was and where she fit. Now she felt like she was floating in space, untethered from everything that had made her real. Her phone buzzed with another text from her mother. "How is married life, sweetheart? We're so happy for you." Zara stared at the message for a long time before typing back. "It's an adjustment. I love you." That night, she lay in the enormous bed staring at the ceiling and wondering what she'd done. The house was so quiet she could hear her own heartbeat. In her old apartment, there had always been noise. Cars on the street, neighbors talking, Tommy practicing his reading out loud. The sounds of life happening all around her. Here, there was nothing but silence and the weight of expectations she didn't know how to meet. She was trapped in a golden cage and she was starting to wonder if she'd made the biggest mistake of her life. But then she thought about Tommy in his new room, about her mother not having to work 2 jobs anymore, about the future her sacrifice had bought them. Maybe her happiness didn't matter as much as their security. She just had to survive long enough to figure out how to live in this strange new world, with this cold, distant man who was now her husband in name only. 2 years seemed like forever, but she'd made a promise to her family and to herself. She would find a way to make this work even if it stressed her. The charity gala was a disaster from the moment Zara stepped out of the limousine. The dress Mrs. Romano had chosen was beautiful but felt like a costume. The shoes were so high she could barely walk, and the jewelry was so heavy it made her neck ache. But none of that compared to the terror she felt when she saw the crowd of photographers waiting outside the hotel. "Remember, smile but don't show too much teeth," Adrian murmured as he helped her out of the car. "Stand up straight, hold my arm, and don't say anything unless someone asks you a direct question." The camera flashes were blinding. People shouted questions at them that Zara couldn't even understand over the noise. Adrian guided her through the crowd with a practiced smile, looking completely comfortable while she felt like she was drowning. Adrian, over here. How does it feel to be married? Mrs. Blackwood, tell us about your dress. When's the honeymoon? Zara tried to smile like Mrs. Vanderbilt had taught her, but her face felt frozen. Every step was careful and deliberate because she was terrified of tripping in the ridiculous shoes. By the time they made it inside the hotel, her hands were shaking. You did fine, Adrian said quietly as they walked into the ballroom. I felt like I was going to throw up. It gets easier. But the evening was just beginning. The ballroom was full of people who all seemed to know each other, all dressed in clothes that cost more than most people made in a month. The women looked like they'd stepped out of magazines and the men looked like they owned the world. Which, judging by the conversations Zara overheard, many of them actually did. Adrian, darling. A woman in a silver dress that probably cost more than a car swept over to them. You must introduce me to your beautiful wife. Caroline, this is Zara. Zara Caroline Ashford. Caroline looked Zara up and down like she was inspecting a piece of art she wasn't sure was authentic. How lovely to meet you, dear. Tell me, where did you and Adrian meet? I don't believe I know your family. Zara felt heat rush to her cheeks. They hadn't prepared for this question. We met through mutual friends. Oh, which friends? I know simply everyone in Adrian's circle. Adrian stepped in smoothly. You know how I value my privacy, Caroline. Shall we talk about tonight's cause instead? But Caroline wasn't done. Of course, darling. But I'm just so curious about your romantic story. It's so sudden, your marriage. Some people are saying it's quite mysterious. Some people should mind their own business, Adrian replied, but his smile never wavered. After Caroline finally moved on, Adrian's grip on Zara's arm tightened. Be more careful. Your answers need to be consistent with our story. What story? Nobody told me we had a story. We met at a charity event 2 years ago, dated quietly, and married in a small ceremony because we wanted privacy. Memorize that. The rest of the evening was a blur of introductions, forced conversations, and questions Zara wasn't prepared for. She felt like everyone was watching her, judging her, trying to figure out if she belonged. The worst part was that they were right to be suspicious. She didn't belong here, and it showed in every awkward pause and uncertain smile. During dinner, she listened to conversations about vacation homes in the Hamptons, private schools for children, and charity boards she'd never heard of. She tried to eat the fancy food that looked more like art than something you were supposed to put in your mouth, but her stomach was too twisted with anxiety to keep much down. You're not eating, Adrian observed quietly. I'm not hungry. You need to at least pretend. People notice everything. Zara wanted to scream. People notice everything, stand up straight, don't show your teeth, memorize the story, be someone you're not. The pressure was crushing her. The breaking point came during the dancing portion of the evening. Adrian led her onto the dance floor for what was supposed to be a romantic moment for the cameras, but Zara had never learned to dance properly and the shoes were killing her feet. Just follow my lead, Adrian said as he pulled her into his arms. But following his lead was harder than it sounded when she was terrified of stepping on his feet or falling down in front of everyone. She stumbled twice, and each time she felt Adrian's frustration even though his expression never changed. Relax, he said through gritted teeth. You're stiff as a board. I can't do this, she whispered back. Everyone's staring at us. Because we're supposed to be in love. Try to look like you don't hate me. The words hit her like a slap. She looked up at his face, so handsome and cold and completely unreadable, and something inside her just broke. She couldn't pretend anymore. She couldn't smile and nod and play the part of the happy wife when she felt like she was disappearing a little more every day. I need some air, she said, and before Adrian could stop her, she was walking quickly toward the exit. She made it to the hotel balcony before the tears started. 2 weeks of trying to be someone else, 2 weeks of criticism and correction and feeling like nothing she did was good enough, all came pouring out at once. There you are. Zara turned to find Adrian standing in the doorway, his face dark with anger. Do you have any idea what you just did? Walking away from me in the middle of our dance, in front of everyone? I couldn't breathe in there. You couldn't breathe? You have one job, Zara. One job. Look happy, act like you love me, and don't embarrass me. How hard is that? Harder than you think. The words came out louder than she intended. You want me to act like I love you? You barely speak to me. You treat me like I'm some kind of employee instead of your wife. You are an employee. That's exactly what you are. The words cut deeper than Zara expected. She wiped her eyes with the back of her hand, trying to salvage what was left of her makeup. Fine. Then treat me like one. Give me clear instructions, tell me what you expect, and stop acting like I should just magically know how to be someone I'm not. Adrian's expression softened slightly. You're right. I should have prepared you better for tonight. But running away isn't the answer. We have to go back in there and finish this. I don't think I can. You have to. Too many people are watching, and if this marriage looks fake, it affects more than just us. Zara looked at him through her tears. What aren't you telling me? Why is this marriage so important to you? For a moment she thought he might actually answer her. Something flickered in his eyes, something that looked almost vulnerable. But then his walls went back up. That's not your concern. Can you pull yourself together enough to get through the rest of the evening? Zara nodded, even though she felt empty inside. She let him lead her back into the ballroom, where they made their excuses about needing some fresh air and finished the evening with frozen smiles and careful words. The ride home was silent except for the sound of the city passing by outside the limousine windows. Zara stared out at the lights and wondered what would happen if she just opened the door and ran. Where would she go? What would happen to her family? Back at the house, she went straight to her room without saying goodnight. She peeled off the expensive dress and jewelry, washed the makeup from her face, and put on the most comfortable pajamas she could find. Then she sat on the edge of the bed and called her mother. Hi Mama. How was your day? Wonderful, sweetheart. Tommy made the honor roll at his new school already. Can you believe it? And I had lunch with some of the other mothers in the neighborhood. They're all so nice. How was your fancy party? Zara closed her eyes. Her mother sounded so happy, so relaxed for the first time in years. It was fine. I'm just tired. I'm sure it's a lot to adjust to, living in that big house with all those important people. But you're strong, baby. You can handle anything. After she hung up, Zara sat in the silence of her beautiful empty room and wondered if her mother was right. Maybe she wasn't strong enough for this. Maybe she was going to crack under the pressure and ruin everything for everyone. She was still sitting there an hour later when she heard a soft knock on her door. Come in, she said, expecting Mrs. Patterson. Instead, Adrian stepped into the room. He'd changed out of his tuxedo into jeans and a sweater, and somehow that made him look younger and less intimidating. I wanted to apologize, he said, staying near the door like he wasn't sure he was welcome. I shouldn't have called you an employee. That was cruel. Zara looked up at him in surprise. Oh. And I should have prepared you better for tonight. The questions, the scrutiny, all of it. I'm used to it, but I forgot that you're not. Thank you, she said quietly. Adrian hesitated, then moved closer. Can I ask you something? Why did you really agree to this marriage? I know about your family's debts, but there had to be other options. Zara was quiet for a long moment. Have you ever been really poor? Not just middle class having to budget, but actually poor? Where you count every dollar and still can't make ends meet? He shook his head. Then you can't understand. When you're that desperate, when your little brother might end up in foster care because you can't keep a roof over his head, you'll do anything. Even marry a stranger. I'm sorry, Adrian said, and he sounded like he meant it. I didn't realize how hard this has been for you. Every day I feel like I'm pretending to be someone else. Like the real me is disappearing a little more. I don't know how to be the person you need me to be. Adrian sat down in the chair across from her bed, keeping a careful distance between them. What if I told you that you don't have to disappear? What if we found a way for you to be yourself while still fulfilling the contract? Is that possible? I don't know. But maybe we could try to figure it out together. It was the first real conversation they'd had since she'd moved into the house. For just a moment, Zara felt a tiny spark of hope. Maybe this didn't have to be as impossible as it seemed. I'd like that, she said. Adrian stood up to leave, then paused at the door. Zara? You did better tonight than you think. It takes courage to walk into a room full of strangers and hold your head up, even when you're scared. After he left, Zara lay in bed thinking about his words. Maybe she hadn't been as much of a disaster as she'd thought. Maybe there was hope for this strange arrangement after all. But as she drifted off to sleep, she couldn't shake the feeling that Adrian was still hiding something important from her. Something that made this marriage more than just a business deal. And until she figured out what that was, she would never really understand the man she'd promised to spend the next 2 years of her life with. The next morning brought unexpected changes. Instead of the usual parade of instructors, Mrs. Patterson informed Zara that Adrian had canceled her lessons for the day. Mr. Adrian thought you might like to visit your family, she said, handing Zara a set of car keys. The blue sedan in the garage is yours to use whenever you'd like. Zara stared at the keys in amazement. He got me a car? He said you shouldn't feel trapped here. Independence is important for adjusting to married life. An hour later, Zara was pulling into the driveway of her family's new house, her heart pounding with excitement and nervousness. She hadn't seen them since the wedding, which had been a small, awkward ceremony with just the immediate families present. The house was beautiful. Not mansion beautiful like the Blackwood estate, but warm and welcoming in a way that made Zara's chest tight with emotion. There was a front porch with flowers in pots, and she could see curtains in the windows that she recognized from their old apartment. Zara? Tommy came flying out the front door and launched himself into her arms. At 8 years old he was getting too big to pick up, but she hugged him tight anyway. Look at you. You've grown a foot since I saw you last week. Have not. But look at my new room. And we have a backyard. A real backyard with grass. He dragged her inside, chattering excitedly about his new school and his new friends and the dog their neighbor said they could play with anytime. Her mother appeared in the doorway of what looked like a bright, cheerful kitchen, and Zara felt tears start in her eyes. Mama, you look so good. And she did. The stress lines that had been carved into her mother's face for years were already starting to fade. She looked rested and happy in a way Zara hadn't seen since before her father died. Thanks to you, baby. Thanks to what you did for us. They spent the morning looking through the house, which had 3 bedrooms, 2 bathrooms, and more space than they'd ever had before. Tommy's room was decorated with superhero posters and had a desk where he could do homework. Her mother had her own room with a reading chair by the window. There was even a small room that her mother said she was thinking of turning into a craft space. I never thought I'd have a hobby room, her mother said with wonder. A place just for me to do things I enjoy. Over lunch, Tommy told her all about his new school. The kids are really nice and the teachers are smart and we have a computer lab and everything. And guess what? I'm going to be in the school play. That's wonderful, Tommy. What play? Peter Pan. I'm going to be one of the lost boys. Will you come see it? Zara's throat tightened. When is it? Next month. Mom said you might be too busy with your new husband, but I really want you to come. Of course I'll come. Nothing could keep me away. After Tommy went outside to play in the backyard, Zara and her mother sat on the front porch with cups of tea. It felt so normal and peaceful after the coldness of the mansion. How are you really doing, sweetheart? Her mother asked quietly. You look thin and tired. I'm fine, Mama. Just adjusting. Is he good to you? Adrian? Zara thought about how to answer that. He's not cruel. He's just distant. It's hard to explain. Marriage takes time, especially when you don't know each other well. Maybe you just need to be patient. Maybe. Her mother took her hand. I know this wasn't the life you dreamed of. I know you sacrificed your own happiness for us. That's not something a mother ever wants from her child. You don't need to feel guilty, Mama. Look at this place. Look how happy Tommy is. Look at you. This is worth it. You deserve to be happy too. I will be. I just need time to figure it all out. When it was time to leave, Tommy made her promise to come back soon, and her mother packed her a bag of homemade cookies. For your husband, she said. Men always like homemade cookies. The drive back to the mansion felt like traveling between 2 different worlds. Her family's house was full of life and laughter and love. The Blackwood estate was beautiful but cold, like a perfect picture with no soul behind it. She was surprised to find Adrian in the kitchen when she came in through the back door. He was sitting at the breakfast bar with a cup of coffee and what looked like business papers spread out in front of him. How was your visit? He asked, looking up from his work. Wonderful. Thank you for arranging it. And for the car. You looked like you needed to get out of here. Zara set the bag of cookies on the counter. My mother sent these for you. She says all men like homemade cookies. Adrian looked at the bag like he wasn't sure what to do with it. That was thoughtful of her. Have you ever had homemade cookies? No, I don't think so. Our cook always made everything from scratch, but it wasn't the same thing. Zara opened the bag and pulled out one of her mother's chocolate chip cookies. Try it. Adrian took a bite and his expression changed. This is incredible. What's in it? Love mostly. And chocolate chips. Zara found herself smiling. My mother has been making these since I was Tommy's age. They were always my favorite comfort food. Tommy is your brother? My little brother. He's 8 and he's the smartest, funniest kid you'll ever meet. He's going to be in his school play next month. Adrian nodded, then seemed to realize something. You should go. To his play. Really? Even if it conflicts with our social calendar? We'll make it work. They sat in comfortable silence for a few minutes, Adrian eating cookies and Zara watching him discover something she'd taken for granted her whole life. It was strange to see him look so normal, almost relaxed. "Can I ask you something?" Zara said. "Sure. Why did you cancel my lessons today? Yesterday you were angry that I wasn't fitting in well enough." Adrian was quiet for a long moment. "Because I realized I was trying to turn you into someone else instead of helping you be the best version of yourself. That's not fair to either of us. So what happens now? Now we try a different approach. Instead of trying to make you into the perfect society wife, maybe we figure out how to present the real you in a way that works for both of us." It was the most hopeful thing anyone had said to her since this whole thing started. "I'd like that." "Good. 'Cause I have an idea. There's a charity event next weekend, but instead of another stuffy gala, it's a fundraiser for literacy programs. They need volunteers to read to kids at the local library." "Interested?" Zara's face lit up. "Really? That sounds perfect. I thought you might like it better than dancing with people you don't know." For the first time since she'd moved into the mansion, Zara felt like she might be able to do this. Not the perfect wife act, but something real. Something that mattered. "Adrian? Thank you. For today, for the car, for understanding. Thank you for the cookies. I think your mother might be a genius." That evening, instead of eating dinner in the formal dining room in silence, they ate at the kitchen counter and actually talked. About books, about the charity event, about small things that didn't feel heavy or loaded with expectations. It wasn't love and it wasn't even friendship yet. But it was something. A crack in the wall that Adrian had built around himself, and maybe the beginning of something that could work for both of them. As Zara got ready for bed that night, she felt lighter than she had in weeks. Maybe she didn't have to disappear after all. Maybe she could find a way to be herself and still fulfill her obligations. Maybe there was hope for this strange marriage after all. The literacy fundraiser was everything Zara had hoped it would be and more. Instead of uncomfortable cocktail dresses and painful shoes, she wore a simple sundress and flats. Instead of making small talk with people who looked at her like she didn't belong, she spent the afternoon reading stories to children who hung on every word. And then the little mouse said, "I can help too." Zara read to a group of 6-year-olds who were sitting cross-legged on the library carpet. "Just because I'm small doesn't mean I'm not brave." The children cheered when the mouse saved the day, and Zara felt her heart warm in a way it hadn't since she'd left her old life behind. This felt real. This felt like something that mattered. "You're a natural with them." Zara looked up to see an older woman watching her with kind eyes. She was probably in her 70s, with silver hair and laugh lines that spoke of a life well lived. "I love kids," Zara said, closing the book as the children scattered to find new activities. "They're so honest and enthusiastic about everything." "I'm Eleanor Richmond," the woman said, settling into the chair next to Zara. "And you must be the mysterious Mrs. Blackwood everyone's been talking about." Zara's stomach tightened. "I guess that's me. Don't look so worried, dear. I'm not here to interrogate you like some of those vultures at the charity circuit. I'm here because I knew Adrian's mother." "You did?" Eleanor's face softened. "Margaret was my dearest friend. We served on several charity boards together, and our children played together when they were small. I watched Adrian grow up and I've been worried about him for years." "Worried about him?" "That boy has been carrying the weight of the world on his shoulders since he was 15 years old. After Margaret died, Richard became so focused on business and the family reputation that Adrian never really got to be young. He's forgotten how to be happy." Zara looked across the library to where Adrian was helping a group of older kids with a reading comprehension exercise. He looked more relaxed than she'd ever seen him, laughing at something one of the kids had said. "He seems happy enough," Zara said carefully. "In moments like this, yes. But most of the time he's like a man carrying an invisible burden. I was starting to think he'd never find someone who could help him put it down. I'm not sure I'm that person." Eleanor studied her with sharp but kind eyes. "Maybe not yet. But you're the first woman he's ever brought to an event like this. Usually he only shows up to the formal galas where he can network and conduct business. This is different. This was his idea. Exactly my point. He's trying to show you who he really is underneath all that armor he wears." Before Zara could ask what she meant, a little girl with pigtails tugged on her dress. "Will you read us another story, please?" Zara spent the rest of the afternoon reading and playing games with the children while Adrian worked with the older kids on their homework. Every now and then she'd catch him watching her, and instead of the cold, calculating look she was used to, his expression was softer. Almost fond. As they were getting ready to leave, Eleanor pulled Zara aside. "I want to give you my phone number," she said, pressing a card into Zara's hand. I know how overwhelming it can be stepping into the Blackwood world. Margaret went through the same thing when she married Richard, though their situation was quite different. Different how? She married for love, but she was still an outsider. The society crowd can be brutal to newcomers, especially ones they think don't belong. If you ever need someone to talk to, someone who understands, please call me. Thank you, Zara said, touched by the unexpected kindness. That means more than you know. On the drive home, Adrian seemed lighter than usual. You were amazing today, he said. Those kids adored you. I had fun. Real fun for the first time since. She trailed off, not wanting to remind him of how miserable she'd been. Since you moved in with us. I know. I'm sorry about that. It's getting better. Eleanor seemed to take to you. She told me she knew your mother. Adrian's hands tightened slightly on the steering wheel. Eleanor and my mother were very close. She's been like a grandmother to me since Mom died. She seems lovely. She is. She's also one of the few people who isn't afraid to tell my father exactly what she thinks of his decisions. There was something in his tone that made Zara look at him more carefully. She's worried about you. Eleanor worries about everyone. It's her nature. But Zara could tell there was more to it than that. Adrian, can I ask you something? And will you give me an honest answer? He glanced at her. Depends on the question. Why did you really need to get married? I know it's not just about having someone to take to parties. There's something else, isn't there? For a long moment she thought he wasn't going to answer. Then he pulled into the driveway of the mansion and turned off the car, but made no move to get out. My father is getting older, he said finally. The board of directors has been questioning whether he should remain as CEO, especially after some business difficulties last year. They want to see stability in the family. A settled heir who can take over when the time comes. And being married makes you look more stable? Being married to the right kind of woman does. Someone who fits the image they want for the company. But I don't fit that image. I'm nobody from nowhere with no connections or social standing. Adrian turned to look at her directly. You're kind, genuine, and you care about things that matter. You made those kids light up today just by paying attention to them. That's worth more than all the social connections in the world. It was the nicest thing he'd ever said to her. Thank you. Besides, he added with a slight smile, you're learning to fit the image when you need to. You just haven't learned to be comfortable with it yet. That evening they had dinner together in the small breakfast nook instead of the formal dining room. It felt almost normal, like they were actually getting to know each other instead of just playing roles. Tell me about your family, Zara said as they shared leftover Chinese takeout that Adrian had surprised her by bringing home. Not much to tell. My father built the company from nothing, my mother tried to keep us all human, and I've been preparing to take over since I was old enough to read financial reports. That sounds lonely. It was practical. Someone has to carry on the family business. But what do you want to do? If you could do anything in the world, what would it be? Adrian was quiet for so long that Zara thought he wasn't going to answer. I used to want to be a teacher, he said finally. Like today working with those kids. But that's not realistic for someone in my position. Why not? You could teach business courses or work with literacy programs like today. The company needs me. The company needs a CEO. That doesn't necessarily have to be you. Adrian looked at her like she'd said something revolutionary. I never thought about it that way. That night, Zara called Eleanor using the card she'd been given. I was hoping you'd call, dear, Eleanor said warmly. How are you settling in? Better, I think. Today helped a lot. Thank you for being so kind to me. You don't need to thank me for basic human decency. But I'm glad you're feeling more at home. Eleanor, can I ask you something? About Adrian's mother? Of course. What was she like? Adrian doesn't talk about her much, but I can tell he misses her terribly. Eleanor was quiet for a moment. Margaret was light in warmth and laughter. She had a way of making everyone around her feel special and loved. She softened Richard's harder edges and gave Adrian a safe place to just be a child. When she died, it was like someone turned off the sun in that house. That's so sad. It was devastating. But Margaret would be heartbroken to see how closed off Adrian has become. She always said he had the biggest heart of anyone she'd ever known, but he's buried it so deep to protect himself. How do you help someone who doesn't want to be helped? You be patient. You show them that it's safe to let their guard down. And you don't give up on them even when they give up on themselves. After she hung up, Zara sat in her room thinking about everything Eleanor had said. Maybe Adrian wasn't as cold and unreachable as she'd thought. Maybe he was just scared and lonely, hiding behind walls he'd built to protect himself from more loss. For the first time since this whole arrangement began, Zara found herself genuinely curious about the man she'd married. Not just as a puzzle to solve or a contract to fulfill, but as a person who might need someone to care about him as much as she needed security for her family. Maybe they could help each other after all. The call came at 3 in the morning. Zara woke to the sound of Adrian's phone buzzing insistently from his room across the hall, followed by his muffled voice speaking urgently to someone. Then she heard his door open and his footsteps moving quickly down the hallway. Something was wrong. Zara wrapped a robe around herself and stepped into the hallway. The house was dark except for the light coming from Richard's study downstairs. She could hear voices, Adrian's and his father's, both tense and worried. She shouldn't eavesdrop. It wasn't her business. But something in Adrian's voice made her move quietly to the top of the stairs where she might be able to hear what was happening. "Can't let this get out," Richard was saying. "If the board finds out about the Singapore deal before we have a chance to explain." "It's too late for explanations," Adrian replied, his voice strained. "The story breaks in 6 hours. We need to get ahead of this." "How?" "The numbers don't lie, Adrian. We lost $40 million because I trusted the wrong people. The board will demand my resignation, and they'll question your ability to lead after me. Then we tell them the truth. We made a mistake, we've learned from it, and we're implementing new oversight procedures to make sure it never happens again. You think they'll accept that? After everything that's happened this year?" There was a long silence. Then Adrian said, "If they don't, then maybe it's time to consider other options." "Other options?" "This company is our legacy, Adrian. 4 generations of Blackwoods have built this empire. I won't be the one to lose it. And I won't be the one to destroy my life trying to hold on to something that might already be gone." Zara heard footsteps approaching the stairs and quickly ducked back into her room, closing the door softly behind her. Her heart was pounding. $40 million lost? The company in trouble? No wonder Adrian had seemed so stressed, so closed off. He wasn't just dealing with an arranged marriage, he was dealing with the potential collapse of everything his family had built. The next morning, Adrian was gone before she woke up. Mrs. Patterson explained that he'd had to leave early for urgent business meetings, but her expression was troubled. Even the household staff could sense that something was wrong. Zara spent the morning trying to concentrate on a book, but her mind kept wandering to what she'd overheard. Should she say something to Adrian? Pretend she didn't know? Try to help somehow? Around noon her phone rang. It was Eleanor. "Hello, dear. I hope you don't mind me calling, but I wanted to check on you. I imagine things are quite tense at the house today. You know about the business troubles? Word travels fast in our circles, I'm afraid. The financial papers will have the story this afternoon, and it's not flattering to the Blackwood name." Zara felt her stomach drop. "How bad is it?" "Bad enough that people are starting to whisper about whether Adrian is ready to take over the company. Some are saying Richard should step down and bring in outside management." "What does that mean for Adrian?" "It means his position is more precarious than ever. The board will be watching his every move, looking for any sign of weakness or instability. Including his marriage to a girl from the wrong side of town who couldn't even make it through a charity gala without falling apart." Zara suddenly understood why this marriage was so important, and why Adrian had been so desperate for it to look perfect. "Eleanor, I need to ask you something, and I need you to be completely honest with me." "Of course. This marriage, it's not just about looking stable for the board, is it? There's something specific they need from me." Eleanor was quiet for a moment. "You're more perceptive than I gave you credit for." "What is it?" "The Singapore deal that went bad, it was with a company owned by the Chin family. The same family that arranged your marriage." Zara felt the pieces clicking into place. "They arranged my marriage as part of some kind of business deal?" "Not exactly. The Chens owed money to some very dangerous people after the Singapore deal collapsed. Richard offered to cover their debts in exchange for their help arranging Adrian's marriage. They knew about your family's situation through Mrs. Chen. So I was basically traded to cover someone else's business mistake?" "I'm afraid it's more complicated than that. The board doesn't know about the connection between your marriage and the Singapore deal. If they found out, it would look like the Blackwoods were using marriage to cover up business failures. That would be the end of Adrian's career." Zara sank into a chair, her head spinning. "And if our marriage falls apart or looks fake? It raises questions about why Adrian married you so suddenly, which could lead to them discovering the truth about the business arrangements. So if I fail at being the perfect wife, I don't just embarrass Adrian. I destroy his entire future. I'm sorry, dear. I thought you should know what you're really dealing with." After Eleanor hung up, Zara sat in the empty mansion trying to process everything she'd learned. Adrian wasn't just cold and distant because he didn't care about her. He was carrying the weight of his family's legacy, his company's future, and the secret of how their marriage had really come about. No wonder he seemed so stressed all the time. No wonder he'd been so angry when she couldn't play the part perfectly. The stakes were higher than she'd ever imagined. Her phone buzzed with a text from her mother. Saw the news about Adrian's company. Hope everything is okay. Love you. Even her family was going to be affected by this scandal. If Adrian lost his position, what happened to the money that was supporting her mother and Tommy? What happened to Tommy's education, their house, their future? Zara made a decision. She couldn't just sit in this house feeling sorry for herself while Adrian fought for everything that mattered to both their families. She might not be the perfect society wife, but she was smart and determined, and she cared about more than just herself. She called Adrian's office, but his assistant said he was in meetings all day and couldn't be reached. So she got in her car and drove to the Blackwood Enterprises building downtown. The lobby was buzzing with activity: reporters, employees, people in expensive suits who looked like lawyers or board members. Zara had never felt more out of place, but she walked to the reception desk with as much confidence as she could manage. "I'm here to see Adrian Blackwood. I'm his wife." The receptionist looked flustered. "Mrs. Blackwood, I'm sorry, but Mr. Adrian is in emergency board meetings. He left strict instructions not to be disturbed. This is important. Can you at least tell him I'm here?" Before the receptionist could answer, Zara heard her name being called. She turned to see Adrian walking quickly across the lobby toward her, his face a mixture of surprise and concern. "Zara, what are you doing here?" "I needed to see you. I know about Singapore. I know about the chance. I know why you really needed to marry me." Adrian's face went pale. He took her arm and guided her quickly toward the elevators. "Not here. Too many people listening." They rode up to his office in silence, but Zara could feel the tension radiating from him. Once they were alone with the door closed, he turned to face her. "How much do you know?" "Enough. Eleanor told me about the business connection, and I overheard you and your father talking last night." Adrian sank into his desk chair and put his head in his hands. "I should have told you from the beginning. I should have been honest about what you were walking into." "Why weren't you?" "Because I was ashamed. Because I didn't want you to know that your life was being used as collateral for my family's mistakes. Because I was afraid you'd walk away if you knew the truth." Zara moved closer to his desk. "And now?" "Now I'm afraid you'll walk away because you do know the truth." "Adrian, look at me." He raised his head, and she saw exhaustion and worry and fear in his eyes. For the first time since she'd met him, he looked completely vulnerable. "I'm not walking away," she said firmly. "We're in this together whether we planned it or not. So stop trying to handle everything alone and let me help." "How can you help?" "This is business, board politics, things you don't understand." "I understand people. I understand what it's like to fight for your family. And I understand that we're stronger together than we are apart." For a long moment, Adrian just stared at her. Then something in his expression shifted. The walls he'd kept up between them started to come down. "The board meeting is tomorrow," he said quietly. "They're going to decide whether to keep my father as CEO or bring in outside management. If they vote him out, my chances of ever running this company are basically zero. Then we make sure they don't vote him out." "How?" "I don't know yet. But we figure it out together." Adrian stood up and walked around his desk until he was standing directly in front of her. "Why are you doing this? Why do you care what happens to me or my family's company?" Zara looked up at him, this man who had been a stranger just weeks ago but who was now tied to her future in ways she was only beginning to understand. "Because you're my husband," she said simply. "And because I'm starting to think that maybe this arrangement could be something more than just a business deal if we let it." For the first time since she'd known him, Adrian smiled. Not the polite, public smile he wore to events, but a real smile that reached his eyes and transformed his entire face. "I think I'd like that," he said. And for the first time since this whole crazy situation began, Zara thought that maybe, just maybe, they had a real chance at making this work. The next morning, Zara woke up with a plan. It wasn't a perfect plan, and it definitely wasn't something she'd learned in any of her etiquette lessons, but it was real and it came from her heart. That had to count for something. She found Adrian in his study at 6 a.m., surrounded by papers and looking like he hadn't slept at all. He was wearing the same clothes from yesterday, and there were dark circles under his eyes. "Have you been up all night?" she asked, setting a cup of coffee next to his elbow. "Couldn't sleep. The board meeting is in 3 hours, and I still don't know what I'm going to say to convince them to keep my father on. Maybe that's not the right question. Adrian looked up at her. What do you mean? Maybe instead of trying to convince them to keep your father, you should be showing them why they should trust you. They don't trust me. I'm too young, too inexperienced, and now my judgment is in question because of the Singapore deal. Zara sat down across from him. Okay, let's think about this differently. What do you have that an outside manager wouldn't have? Nothing. They'd bring in someone with more experience, better connections, a proven track record. But they wouldn't have your heart. Heart doesn't run a business, Zara. Doesn't it? Yesterday at the library, you were amazing with those kids because you cared about them. You weren't thinking about profit margins or business strategies. You were thinking about making a difference. Adrian was quiet, considering her words. What if, Zara continued, instead of focusing on the Singapore deal as a failure, you presented it as a learning experience that led to something better? What if you showed them that the Blackwood Company isn't just about making money, but about making a positive impact? The board doesn't care about positive impact. They care about quarterly profits. Some of them do. But what about the others? Eleanor told me your mother served on charity boards with several of the board members' wives. These are people who understand that business can be about more than just money. Adrian looked at her with something like hope in his eyes. What are you suggesting? I'm suggesting you tell them about your vision for the company. Not just maintaining what your father built, but growing it into something that matters. Show them the literacy program you want to expand, the education initiatives you've been thinking about, the community partnerships that could set Blackwood Enterprises apart from every other corporation. And if they think I'm being naive and idealistic? Then you tell them that naive and idealistic people are the ones who change the world. And that you'd rather run a company that means something than one that just makes money. Adrian stood up and started pacing. It's risky. If it doesn't work, I'll look like a dreamer instead of a businessman. And if it does work, you'll look like a leader instead of just another CEO. He stopped pacing and looked at her directly. You really think this could work? I think you're incredible when you let people see who you really are. I think the board needs to see the man I saw yesterday with those kids, not the man who's been trying to be what he thinks they want. Adrian was quiet for a long moment. Then he said, there's something else. Something I need to tell you before the meeting. Zara felt her stomach tighten. What? If this doesn't go well today, if the board votes no confidence in my father and brings in outside management, there's a good chance I'll lose my position entirely. Which means I won't be able to fulfill my end of our contract. What does that mean exactly? It means your family's financial security might not be as guaranteed as we promised. It means this whole arrangement might fall apart. Zara took a deep breath. Are you asking me to leave? I'm asking you what you want to do if everything goes wrong. You didn't sign up to be married to an unemployed former executive. No, I signed up to be married to you. For better or worse, isn't that how the vows go? Those were just words, Zara. Legal formalities. Were they? She stood up and moved closer to him. Because somewhere along the way this stopped being just a business arrangement for me. I care about what happens to you. I care about your dreams and your family and your future. And I think you care about me too. Adrian's expression softened. I do care about you. More than I expected to. More than I should. Then stop trying to protect me from your problems and let me stand beside you while we face them together. Even if we lose everything? We won't lose everything. We'll have each other. And that's not nothing. Adrian stepped closer to her, close enough that she could see the flecks of gold in his green eyes. When did you become so wise? When I married a man who was worth fighting for. He reached up and touched her face gently, like he was memorizing it. I think I'm falling in love with you, Zara Johnson Blackwood. I think I already fell, she whispered back. This time when he kissed her, it wasn't for show or for cameras. It was real and soft and full of promise. It was the first kiss of their real marriage, the one that was about more than contracts and obligations. When they broke apart, Adrian rested his forehead against hers. Whatever happens today, I want you to know that marrying you was the best decision I've ever made. Even if it was for all the wrong reasons. It wasn't for the wrong reasons. It was for family. There's never anything wrong with fighting for family. 2 hours later, Zara sat in the waiting area outside the Blackwood Enterprises boardroom, her heart pounding as she listened to the muffled voices from inside. Adrian had been in there for an hour, presenting his vision for the company's future to 12 board members who held his family's legacy in their hands. She'd wanted to go in with him, but he'd insisted this was something he needed to do alone. You've already given me everything I need, he'd said. The courage to be myself instead of who I think they want me to be. Eleanor arrived and sat beside her. How are you holding up, dear? Terrified, Zara admitted. What if they don't listen? What if they think he's too young or inexperienced? Then they're fools, Eleanor said firmly. That boy has more integrity and vision than half the CEOs in this city. If they can't see that, it's their loss. But it's his future. His future doesn't depend on one company, Zara. It depends on him being true to who he is and surrounding himself with people who believe in him. Like you. The boardroom door opened and Adrian emerged. His expression was unreadable, and Zara's heart stopped as she searched his face for any clue about what had happened. Well? Eleanor asked when Adrian didn't speak immediately. They voted, Adrian said slowly. 8-4. Zara felt her world crashing down. I'm so sorry, Adrian. We'll figure something out. We'll. 8-4 in favor of keeping my father as CEO and naming me a successor when he's ready to retire. It took a moment for the words to sink in. You won. Adrian's serious expression broke into a grin. We won. They loved the literacy program proposal. 3 of them want to fund pilot programs in their own communities. And Mrs. Ashford said she's never seen a more passionate presentation in her 20 years on the board. Zara threw her arms around him, not caring that they were in the middle of a corporate office building. I'm so proud of you. We did it together, he said, holding her tight. I couldn't have done any of this without you. Eleanor wiped tears from her eyes. Margaret would be so proud of both of you. You've reminded this family what it means to fight for something that matters. That evening, they celebrated with takeout Chinese food and champagne in the breakfast nook, still too amazed by the day's events to want anything formal or fancy. So what happens now? Zara asked as they shared lo mein straight from the container. Now we build the programs we promised. Now I learn how to run a company that makes a difference instead of just making money. Now we figure out how to be married for real instead of just for show. Are you sure that's what you want? I mean, you could probably find someone more suitable now that the pressure is off. Adrian set down his chopsticks and looked at her seriously. Zara, you saved my company today. Not because you knew anything about business, but because you believed in me when I didn't believe in myself. You stood by me when everything was falling apart, and you fought for my dreams like they were your own. Why would I ever want anyone else? Because I'm still just a girl from the wrong side of town who doesn't know how to navigate your world. And I'm still a man who almost lost everything because he was too afraid to be himself. I think we make a pretty good team. What about the contract? The 2-year agreement? Adrian pulled a folded paper from his pocket and tore it in half. Consider it null and void. If you want to stay married to me, it's going to be because you choose to, not because you have to. Zara looked at the torn contract pieces, then back at Adrian's hopeful face. And if I choose to stay? Then we build a real marriage. We take our time getting to know each other. We make mistakes and figure things out together. We turn this business arrangement into a love story. I'd like that, Zara said, reaching across the table to take his hand. I'd like that very much. Good, Adrian said, bringing her hand to his lips and kissing it gently. Because I love you, Zara Blackwood. And I want to spend the rest of my life proving it to you. For the first time since this whole crazy journey began, Zara felt like she was exactly where she belonged. Not because she had to be, but because she wanted to be. And that made all the difference in the world. Just when Zara thought their biggest challenges were behind them, life reminded her that happiness was never guaranteed. It started with a phone call at 6 in the morning, 3 weeks after Adrian's successful board presentation. Zara, honey, you need to come home right away. Her mother's voice was shaking and Zara was instantly awake. Mama, what's wrong? Is it Tommy? It's Tommy. He's in the hospital. There was an accident at school and he hit his head really hard. The doctors say? Her mother's voice broke into sobs. Zara was already pulling on clothes, her hands shaking as she tried to button her jeans. I'm coming. Which hospital? St. Mary's. Zara, they're saying he might need surgery. Something about swelling in his brain. I don't understand all the medical words, but it sounds really bad. I'll be there in 20 minutes. Don't worry, Mama. Tommy's tough. He's going to be okay. But as Zara hung up the phone, she felt terror creeping into her chest. What if Tommy wasn't okay? What if something happened to her little brother, the boy who had trusted her to take care of him? Adrian appeared in her doorway, already dressed for the day. What's wrong? It's Tommy. He's hurt. I have to go to the hospital. I'll drive you. You don't have to do that. You have meetings today and... Zara. Adrian took her face in his hands, stopping her frantic packing. Your family is my family now. Of course I'm coming with you. The drive to the hospital felt like it took forever, even though Adrian drove faster than she'd ever seen him drive. Zara stared out the window and tried not to think about all the terrible possibilities. Tommy was only 8 years old. He was supposed to grow up and go to college and have adventures and fall in love. He couldn't be seriously hurt. The universe couldn't be that cruel. They found her mother in the pediatric waiting room, pacing back and forth with red eyes and wrinkled clothes. When she saw Zara, she collapsed into her arms. Thank God you're here. The doctors won't tell me anything except that they're running tests. It's been 3 hours and I don't know anything. Where is he? Can we see him? They said no visitors until they know more about his condition. Zara, what if I lose him? What if something happens to my baby? Adrian stepped forward. Mrs. Johnson, I'm Adrian. We haven't properly met, but I want you to know that Tommy is going to have the best medical care possible. I've already called Dr. Richards, the head of pediatric neurosurgery here. He's a friend of the family and he's going to personally oversee Tommy's case. Zara's mother looked at Adrian with surprise and gratitude. You did that. Family takes care of family. That's what we do. Just then, a doctor in scrubs approached them. Mrs. Johnson? I'm Dr. Martinez. I've been treating your son. How is he? Is he going to be okay? Dr. Martinez sat down beside them. Tommy has a severe concussion and some swelling in his brain. We're monitoring him closely, but right now we're taking a wait-and-see approach. The next 24 hours will tell us a lot about how he's going to recover. Can we see him? Zara asked. He's sleeping right now, but you can see him for a few minutes. I should warn you that he has a lot of tubes and monitors attached to him. It looks scary, but everything is helping him heal. Tommy looked so small in the hospital bed, dwarfed by all the medical equipment surrounding him. His face was pale except for a dark bruise on his forehead, and he was so still that Zara had to watch his chest rise and fall to convince herself he was breathing. Hey little man, she whispered, taking his hand. I'm here now. You're going to be okay. Her mother sat on the other side of the bed, stroking Tommy's hair. I keep thinking about how excited he was this morning talking about the science project he was working on. He was so proud of himself for getting an A on his math test. What if he doesn't remember any of that when he wakes up? He will, Zara said firmly. Tommy's the smartest kid I know. He's going to be fine. But as the hours passed, Zara's confidence started to waver. Tommy didn't wake up. The doctors came and went, checking his pupils and asking questions that his mother couldn't answer. Zara found herself making bargains with God, promising anything if Tommy would just open his eyes and be okay. Adrian stayed with them all day, bringing coffee and sandwiches they were too worried to eat, making phone calls to ensure Tommy had the best doctors, and generally being the steady presence that Zara needed more than she'd realized. You don't have to stay, she told him as evening approached. I know you have important things to do. There's nothing more important than this, he said simply. Nothing more important than being here for you. It was after midnight when Tommy finally stirred. Zara had been dozing in the chair beside his bed when she heard a small voice say, Zara? Why are you sleeping in a chair? She was on her feet instantly. Tommy? Oh my God, you're awake. How do you feel? My head hurts. And I'm thirsty. Why am I in the hospital? Zara's mother started crying with relief. You had an accident at school, baby. You hit your head really hard. But you're going to be okay now. Tommy looked around the room, taking in all the medical equipment. This is pretty cool. Do I really need all these machines? For now, Zara said, laughing through her tears. The doctors want to make sure your brain is working properly. My brain is fine. Watch this. Tommy recited the alphabet backwards, then listed all the states in alphabetical order. See? I told you I was fine. Dr. Martinez came in to examine Tommy, and after a series of tests, he pronounced the prognosis much better than they'd feared. The swelling is going down and his cognitive function appears to be normal. We'll keep him for a few more days for observation, but I think he's going to make a full recovery. Zara felt like she could breathe for the first time in 18 hours. Tommy was going to be okay. Her little brother was going to be fine. But the relief was short-lived. The next morning brought a new crisis when the hospital's financial office called to discuss Tommy's medical bills. I'm sorry, Mrs. Johnson, but your insurance has been canceled due to non-payment of premiums. The total bill for your son's treatment is going to be substantial. Zara's mother went pale. Canceled? But I've been paying. She pulled out her checkbook and started flipping through the register, her face growing more confused and frightened by the minute. I don't understand. I've been making payments every month. How can it be canceled? Zara took the checkbook and looked at the entries. Her heart sank as she realized what had happened. Mama, you've been paying the old insurance company. When we moved you to the new house, you needed to switch to a different plan, remember? I thought Adrian's people were handling all of that. Zara felt panic rising in her chest. The medical bills could easily reach hundreds of thousands of dollars. Even with Adrian's help, that was more money than her family could ever repay. I'll handle it, Adrian said quietly when she explained the situation to him. You can't pay for all of this. It's too much. Zara, your brother almost died. Do you really think I care about money right now? But this wasn't part of our agreement. My family's medical emergencies weren't something you signed up for. Adrian took her hands and looked directly into her eyes. Listen to me very carefully. I love you. I love your family because they're part of you. I would pay any amount of money, give up anything I own to keep Tommy safe. This isn't about agreements or contracts. This is about family. What if the board finds out you're spending company money on personal expenses? What if they question your judgment again? Then I'll deal with that when it happens. Right now, the only thing that matters is making sure Tommy gets the care he needs. That evening, as Tommy slept peacefully and the crisis seemed to be passing, Zara and Adrian sat in the hospital cafeteria sharing terrible coffee and stale sandwiches. I was so scared, Zara admitted. When I thought I might lose him, I realized how much my family means to me. How much you mean to me. I was scared too. Not just for Tommy but for you. I've never seen you look so frightened. Thank you for being here. For handling everything. For loving us enough to fight for us. Adrian reached across the table and took her hand. You don't have to thank me for loving you, Zara. That's not something you earn or pay back. It's just something that is. I love you too. More than I thought possible. Even when loving me means dealing with board meetings and society events and all the complications that come with being a Blackwood? Even then. Especially then. Tommy made a full recovery and was released from the hospital a week later with strict instructions to take it easy for a while. Adrian arranged for the best follow-up care, and Tommy thought having a famous neurosurgeon as his doctor was the coolest thing that had ever happened to him. But the experience had changed something fundamental between Zara and Adrian. They'd faced a real crisis together, not as two people fulfilling a contract, but as a married couple supporting each other through the worst possible circumstances. They were no longer playing at being husband and wife. They actually were husband and wife in every way that mattered. And when the society pages ran a story about Adrian Blackwood rushing to the hospital to care for his wife's injured brother, the headline read, Blackwood Family Values, When Love Matters More Than Business. For once, the media had gotten the story exactly right. 6 months later, Zara stood in the same garden where she'd first begun to see glimpses of the real Adrian, but everything was different now. The roses were in full bloom, the fountains sparkled in the afternoon sun, and the space that had once felt cold and perfect now felt like home. She was wearing a simple white dress and holding a bouquet of wildflowers that Tommy had picked for her that morning. This time the wedding was real. You sure about this? Adrian asked, appearing beside her in a dark suit that made his green eyes look even more striking. Last chance to change your mind and run away with a more exciting man. Are you kidding? I've seen you try to make pancakes. You're about as exciting as I can handle. Adrian laughed, and the sound made Zara's heart skip just like it had the first time she'd heard his real laugh, not the polite society version he used to wear like armor. The ceremony was small and perfect. Eleanor served as matron of honor, Tommy was the ring bearer despite still having a small scar on his forehead from his accident, and Zara's mother cried happy tears throughout the entire service. Richard Blackwood, who had surprised everyone by asking to walk Zara down the aisle, whispered to her just before they reached Adrian, "Thank you for bringing my son back to life." The minister who married them was the same one who had married Adrian's parents 29 years earlier, and he spoke about how real love wasn't about perfect circumstances or easy choices, but about choosing each other every day, especially when things got hard. You two have already proven that you can weather storms together, he said, smiling at the couple. You've learned that marriage isn't about finding the perfect person, but about choosing to love an imperfect person perfectly. That's what real love looks like. When Adrian kissed her this time, it was in front of people who loved them both, people who knew their real story and were celebrating their choice to build a life together. It was a kiss that tasted like promises and possibilities and forever. The reception was held in the same garden, with lights strung between the trees and tables covered in flowers that Eleanor and Zara's mother had arranged together. Instead of a formal sit-down dinner, they had a barbecue with all of Adrian and Zara's favorite foods, including her mother's famous chocolate chip cookies for dessert. This is so much better than those fancy parties, Tommy announced, his mouth full of hamburger. Can all your parties be like this from now on? I think we can arrange that, Adrian said, ruffling Tommy's hair. During the dancing, Zara finally got to dance with her husband without worrying about cameras or keeping up appearances. They moved together naturally now, like they'd been partners for years instead of months. Any regrets? Adrian asked as he spun her around the makeshift dance floor. Only that it took us so long to get here. I don't know. I think we needed time to figure out who we were separately before we could become who we are together. And who are we together? Adrian pulled her closer, until she could feel his heart beating against her chest. We're a family. We're partners. We're two people who choose each other every single day, no matter what challenges come our way. I love the sound of that. Later, as the evening wound down and the last guests said their goodbyes, Zara and Adrian found themselves alone in the garden where their real love story had begun. The lights twinkled overhead like stars, and the air was warm and sweet with the scent of roses. So what happens now? Zara asked, settling into Adrian's arms on the bench where they'd had their first real conversation. Now we live our lives. We run the literacy programs we've been planning. We take vacations with your family. We figure out how to balance work and marriage and all the beautiful, messy, complicated things that come with building a life together. What about kids? Do you want kids? Adrian smiled. I want everything with you. Kids, adventures, quiet Sunday mornings, fights about whose turn it is to do the dishes. I want the whole beautiful mess of a real marriage. Good, because I want all of that too. Plus, Tommy already told me he expects at least 3 nieces and nephews, so I think we're committed. Zara laughed. He did not say that. He absolutely did. He also asked if he could be the best man at all our friends' weddings because he's gotten so good at it. That kid. I swear he's 8 going on 30. He's amazing. Just like his sister. They sat in comfortable silence for a while, watching the last of the evening light fade from the sky. This garden had been the first place Zara had felt hope that maybe this arrangement could work. Now it was the place where they were starting their real life together. Adrian? Oh. Thank you. For what? For seeing me. For fighting for us. For choosing to love me even when it was complicated. Thank you for saving me. For teaching me that it's okay to be myself. For showing me what real love looks like. We saved each other. Yes, we did. 1 year later, Zara stood in front of a room full of children at the new Blackwood Community Learning Center, reading them a story about a princess who saved herself and fell in love with a prince who needed saving too. Did they live happily ever after? Asked a little girl with pigtails who reminded Zara of herself at that age. They lived, Zara said, closing the book and smiling at the eager faces looking up at her. They loved each other, they worked hard, they faced challenges together, and they built a beautiful life. Some days were happy, some days were hard, but every day they chose each other. And that's even better than happily ever after. Adrian appeared in the doorway, and Zara's heart still skipped a beat when she saw him, just like it had that very first day. Some things never changed and she was grateful for that. Ready to go home? He asked as the children scattered to their next activity. Always, she said, taking his hand. Home wasn't the mansion anymore, though they still lived there. Home was anywhere they were together, building their love story one day at a time, choosing each other over and over again. As they walked out into the sunshine together, Zara thought about how far they'd come from that first day when she'd signed a contract that seemed like giving up her life. Instead, she'd found her life. She'd found her partner, her family, her purpose, and her happily ever after. It hadn't been easy, and it certainly hadn't been what she'd expected. But it had been real, and it had been worth every moment of fear and uncertainty and growth. Sometimes the best love stories were the ones that started with impossible circumstances and ended with two people who chose to make the impossible possible, together. And they were just getting started.